Power does not respond to need. It does not recognize effort. It does not reward sincerity. Power only reacts to alignment, and most people never understand this because they approach power from below with hunger in their eyes and noise in their mouths. The first mistake is believing that powerful people are impressed by words, enthusiasm, or flattery. They are not. Power has already heard every compliment, absorbed every performance, and seen every desperate attempt to be noticed. What power notices is absence. What it studies is restraint. What it respects is control, especially emotional control. Most humans approach influence like beggars approaching a throne, eager, exposed, predictable. They reveal their desire too early. They speak too much. They try to prove worth instead of embodying it. In doing so, they collapse the psychological distance that power requires in order to engage. This is not connection. This is submission disguised as ambition. To connect with powerful people, you must first understand a brutal truth: power does not seek connection. It selects, it observes, it tests, and it is instinctively drawn toward those who do not chase it. Powerful individuals live inside an emotional economy that operates differently from the masses. Their time is compressed. Their attention is guarded. Their trust is rationed. They are surrounded by noise, requests, praise, fear, dependency. As a result, they develop a heightened sensitivity to psychological signals. They read posture, tone, timing, and silence the way others read words. They are not listening to what you say. They are measuring who you are. This is why connection with power is never built through proximity alone. Standing near power does not grant access to it. Speaking to power does not make you visible to it. Visibility is cheap, value is rare, and value is communicated not through effort, but through positioning. The mind of power asks one question when it encounters another human being: is this person an asset, a liability, or irrelevant? Most people unknowingly answer this question within seconds through nervous energy, over-explanation, or unconscious deference. They collapse their own leverage before the interaction has even begun. Silence, on the other hand, delays judgment. Silence creates ambiguity. Silence forces power to observe instead of dismiss, and in that moment of observation, hierarchy becomes fluid. Power is drawn to those who appear internally complete, those who do not require validation, approval, or rescue. This is not arrogance. It is emotional independence. It signals that your identity is not for sale, and that your presence is intentional, not accidental. This is where Machiavellian understanding becomes essential. Influence is not about appearing useful. It is about appearing strategically positioned. The powerful do not want helpers. They want mirrors, amplifiers, and stabilizers. They want those who reduce chaos, not add to it. Those who understand the terrain without needing instructions. Connection begins long before conversation. It begins in how you manage your own psychology, your impulses, your need to be liked, your fear of being overlooked. If you cannot control your internal state, power will sense it and classify you as unstable regardless of your talent. The illusion most people live under is that access to power is granted through persistence. In reality, persistence repels power when it is uninvited. Power does not open doors for those who knock loudly. It opens doors for those who already appear to belong on the other side. This is why the most dangerous individuals are often the quietest in the room. They do not announce intention. They do not rush connection. They allow others to project onto them, and projection is where leverage is born. To connect with powerful people, you must invert the instinct to impress. You must replace eagerness with calibration. Replace explanation with precision. Replace visibility with selective presence. When you speak, it must feel necessary. When you are silent, it must feel deliberate. Power is not seduced by ambition. It is intrigued by restraint. This series will dissect that architecture layer by layer. How power perceives approach. How it tests alignment. How ego collapses when it is no longer fed. How absence creates gravity. And how connection, when executed correctly, feels less like networking and more like inevitability. Because in the end, powerful people do not connect with those who seek them. They connect with those who reflect their own psychology back to them, clean, controlled, and unafraid. Before power ever considers your value, it tests your containment. Not through direct confrontation, but through subtle pressure. a delayed response, a neutral expression, a moment of silence that feels slightly uncomfortable. These are not accidents. They are probes designed to see whether your internal state remains stable when attention is withdrawn. Most people fail here without realizing it. The absence unsettles them. They rush to fill the void with words, justification, humor, explanation. Their nervous system betrays them. Power observes this and learns something critical. This person leaks emotion. This person can be pulled. Powerful individuals are obsessed with control, not only over others, but over environments. Anyone who cannot regulate themselves becomes a variable, and variables are dangerous. This stage is where connection is silently decided, not by what you offer, but by how you hold yourself when nothing is offered back. Emotional stillness is not passivity, it is discipline. It communicates that your sense of identity is not dependent on immediate feedback. You are not trying to win favor. You are not trying to be seen. You are present without performing. This unnerves power because it disrupts hierarchy. When you do not react, you are no longer clearly beneath. When you do not seek reassurance, you imply internal authority. And power respects authority instinctively even when it does not fully understand its source. Machiavellian thinking recognizes this as the economy of reaction. Whoever reacts first loses leverage. Whoever reveals emotional investment too early surrenders position. Power knows this. It watches carefully for signs of impatience, validation seeking, or psychological hunger. Silence, when mastered, becomes a mirror. Power begins to project its own assumptions onto you. Are you confident? Are you dangerous? Are you indifferent? In that ambiguity, curiosity replaces dismissal. This is where most connections are quietly killed or quietly born. If you remain calm while ignored, composed while delayed, and precise when finally engaged, you signal rarity. You signal that you are not desperate for access, that you can stand near power without bending toward it. At this stage, connection is not formed through dialogue. It is formed through contrast. You become distinct from the emotional noise surrounding power. And in that distinction, attention sharpens. Power does not yet trust you, but it no longer overlooks you. And that is the first breach in the wall. Once power has noticed your emotional containment, it initiates a second, more dangerous test, the illusion of equality. This is where many destroy themselves without realizing it. Power may soften, tone becomes casual, language becomes inclusive. You may be given access, conversation, proximity, even humor. This is not acceptance. This is exposure. Power is observing whether your ego expands in response to perceived elevation. Most people mistake access for status. They relax their discipline. They overstep boundaries. They speak too freely, too personally, too confidently. Their posture shifts from controlled presence to imagined partnership. And in that moment, power learns the truth. This person does not understand hierarchy. Machiavellian awareness demands a cold recognition. Power never forgets the distance it holds. When you forget it, you reveal immaturity. This stage is not about dominance. It is about self-erasure of ego. You must neither shrink nor inflate. You must hold your identity steady while the environment attempts to distort it. Speak without familiarity. Listen without submission. Participate without entitlement. Power is watching how you manage perceived elevation. Do you begin to signal ownership? Do you reference future closeness? Do you imply expectation? These are subtle ego leaks, and power despises leaks. True psychological alignment occurs when you behave the same before, during, and after access. No tonal shift, no change in self-image, no emotional reward visible on your face. This consistency communicates internal sovereignty. At this level, power begins to sense something rare. You are not intoxicated by proximity. You are not trying to extract identity from the connection. You are not confusing presence with belonging. This unsettles power's ego. It expects either fear or hunger. When it encounters neutrality, it is forced to recalibrate. You are no longer a subordinate climbing upward. You become an object of evaluation, possibly even reflection. The collapse that must occur here is your own. Any desire to be chosen, recognized, or elevated must die silently. Power can smell ambition disguised as calm, but it cannot penetrate genuine detachment. If you pass this stage, connection deepens without declaration. There is no announcement, no agreement, only a quiet shift in how power positions you internally. You are no longer an outsider reaching in. You are a stable presence power has not yet categorized and therefore cannot easily dismiss. After ego is tested, power moves to its most calculating phase, utility assessment. Not overtly, not through requests, but through observation of how you position your value. Power does not ask, "What can you do?" It asks, "How do you make my world simpler?" And more importantly, at what cost? Most people fail here by advertising usefulness. They volunteer too quickly. They offer solutions before problems are named. They make themselves accessible, responsive, eager. In doing so, they transform from asset to resource, and resources are consumed, not respected. Machiavellian strategy demands a precise balance: be useful, but scarce, valuable but not pliable, present but not owned. Power is drawn to those who solve problems indirectly, those who stabilize environments without credit, those whose impact is felt more than announced. When value is obvious but unclaimed, power becomes curious. It seeks to understand the source. Availability is the enemy of leverage. The more reachable you are, the less gravity you hold. Power senses this instinctively. If you can be summoned at will, you belong beneath. If your presence feels timed, deliberate, and selective, hierarchy becomes uncertain. This stage is about controlled contribution. You engage only where your involvement creates disproportionate effect. You speak only when clarity is needed. You act without framing it as service. Power watches how you manage your boundaries. Do you say yes reflexively? Do you bend timelines? Do you sacrifice your internal order to maintain access? Each concession is logged. Those who last near power understand this. Usefulness must never look like dependence. Your value should appear to originate from structure, not effort, from alignment, not availability. Here, silence again becomes strategic. You do not rush to fill gaps others created. You allow inefficiencies to remain visible. Power must feel the absence of your input before it recognizes its weight. When power begins to anticipate your presence instead of commanding it, positioning has shifted. You are no longer evaluated solely on function. You are being considered as infrastructure. Once power recognizes your utility without ownership, it introduces distance. Not as rejection, but as calibration. Communication slows. Access becomes irregular. Signals grow faint. This is not decay. This is measurement. Power is testing whether your identity collapses in its absence. Most people panic here. They interpret distance as loss. They attempt re-entry through reminders, messages, manufactured relevance. In doing so, they erase the gravity they had begun to form. They reveal attachment. And attachment to power is weakness. Controlled absence is not disappearance. It is restraint in motion. You remain visible in consequence, not in presence. Your impact lingers without you explaining it. Your silence is not emptiness, it is pressure. Power responds to vacuum. When something valuable withdraws without hostility, the mind fills the gap with questions. Why did it step back? What does it know? Where is it positioned now? Curiosity replaces control. This is where psychological gravity is born, not through pursuit, but through our unavailability that feels intentional. Machiavellian awareness understands this dynamic well. The most influential force in any system is not the loudest element, but the one whose removal destabilizes equilibrium. When your absence introduces friction, you have moved beyond utility into leverage. Power watches carefully at this stage. It notes whether you maintain structure without reinforcement, whether your emotional economy remains intact, whether you continue building elsewhere without signaling loss. If you withdraw cleanly, without resentment, explanation, or performance, you communicate independence. And independence is the one trait power cannot manufacture or dominate without cost. This stage fractures the ego of power itself. It is accustomed to being chased, reinforced, centered. When it encounters someone who does not orbit it, but intersects and continues, it recalculates hierarchy. You are no longer being evaluated as a participant. You are being considered as a force. And power, when faced with a force it cannot easily replace, begins to move differently. When psychological gravity is established, power does not announce its response. It initiates a silent negotiation. There are no explicit offers, no verbal acknowledgements, no clear shifts in language. Instead, there are changes in behavior, invitations without explanation. questions framed as curiosity, proximity that feels unrequested yet intentional. This is the most delicate phase. Because power is no longer testing your usefulness or restraint, it is testing your identity. Power is asking a question it will never say aloud. Who do you believe you are in relation to me? Most people fail here by overcorrecting. They attempt to reassert independence through coldness, distance, or subtle defiance. Others collapse inward, mistaking renewed attention as validation. Both responses reveal reactivity, and reactivity signals that identity is still externally anchored. Machiavellian discipline demands neutrality. You neither chase nor resist. You do not renegotiate the past or anticipate the future. You remain internally fixed while allowing external dynamics to shift. At this stage, power begins to adjust its internal model of you. You are no longer classified as subordinate nor as rival. You exist in a liminal category, one that requires careful handling. And power is careful only with those it cannot easily dominate. Identity repositioning occurs not through assertion, but through consistency. You speak with the same cadence. You maintain the same boundaries. You neither inflate nor diminish your presence in response to changing access. Power notices this and experiences subtle cognitive friction. Its usual tools, distance, attention, pressure, no longer produce predictable reactions. This forces adaptation. Adaptation is respect in its most honest form. Here, connection becomes less about interaction and more about mutual recognition, not friendship, not alliance, recognition. Power senses that engaging with you requires effort, and effort is only expended on what matters. You are no longer something to be managed. You are something to be accounted for. The final truth is this: powerful people do not form connections out of generosity, curiosity, or admiration. They connect out of necessity. And necessity is born only when another presence cannot be ignored, controlled, or reduced without consequence. This is where illusions collapse, especially the illusion that power is something external, possessed by others and borrowed through proximity. That belief alone disqualifies most from ever standing beside it. Power does not bond with those who seek it. It aligns with those who embody its logic. By the time a true connection forms, it is already unspoken. No agreement was signed, no loyalty declared. The relationship exists because both sides understand the same principle: removal would be costly. This realization is unsettling because it strips away moral comfort. It reveals that influence is not earned through virtue, but through positioning, through emotional mastery, through the willingness to let ego die in silence. Machiavellian thought does not glorify domination, it exposes it. It shows that those who appear to rule others are often enslaved by their own need to be reinforced. Attention, obedience, recognition, these are addictions, and every addiction is a vulnerability. The rare individual who connects with power without being consumed by it is the one who has already conquered the most dangerous opponent: internal dependency. When you no longer need to be chosen, you become selectable. When you no longer fear absence, you become difficult to replace. When your identity does not inflate or fracture in the presence of power, you become its mirror, and mirrors are disturbing things. Power sees itself more clearly around those who do not bend. This is the final inversion. Connection is not the reward for submission. It is the byproduct of self-sovereignty, of emotional dominance so complete that proximity changes nothing, and distance threatens nothing. In the end, powerful people connect with those who make no attempt to connect, because true power recognizes itself not in pursuit, but in stillness.